in love. There's a writer who said the only tragedy on earth is to die without becoming a saint. And to become a saint basically is to become your authentic you, the real you that God created you to be. So each and every one of us is called to be a saint. And the problem is that we're selfish. We're born in this world and we have this kind of sin that focuses in on ourselves. And so we become self-focused. And so what all of our life on here, our life of grace, is about becoming less and less selfish and selfless love. Is a process of transformation. And the saints are the ones who on earth went through that process, and think about them as a prism. When God's light totally refracts light to them, there's no darkness in their sense of their prism. And so when they are ready to go to heaven, when they die, they're ready to enter in the glory. I think about when I was getting ready for my wedding. If James had come early to pick me up, I wouldn't have been ready. I'd be like, go away. I need to get my dress on. I need to get everything ready. I wouldn't have been ready to be able to go into the wedding feast that we were ready for if he came early. So those people who die, perhaps, and they're not completely ready, they still are in a state of grace, but they may have some selfishness they need to be transformed out of love. It's a burning love of Christ in them to transform them more and more to become Saint Me, or the real them. And that's really how I see purgatory, is a time of transforming love. And it makes sense that way. If you die in a state of grace, and you haven't been totally transformed into the real you to be able to see Christ as his bride in the church, that's a time of purgatory to be transformed into love. And those saints, which we're talking about in the communion of saints, are those who died to themselves, whether through martyrdom or through the white martyrdom of dying to self daily. We're the ones who are ready to enter into heaven. Because you know what? If we were to try to go to heaven and weren't ready, we wouldn't be able to handle it. We couldn't handle the fullness of God's truth. So purgatory is really a time to be able to be transformed from that selfish love that we still have to be able to have that selfless love. And I have a few things to share in that process with some of my favorite saints. One of them, we just celebrated her feast day. It's actually a work of art. It's actually this is a project I had to do, which was to take a woman to take somebody who was a strong woman and be able to convey them without physically showing them who they are, but through their attributes. So here's actually a book called The Story of a Soul. We just celebrated St. Teresa's feast day. And I highlighted here in her book, and you can kind of see some hints there. There's like a shadow back here looking over her. And there's, can anyone tell what's in the foreground? What's that picture? What's on the book? A rose. It's a rose that's been de-petaled, okay? So what she said was she entered the convent when she was 16 years old. And people were like, why in the world did you waste your life? She says, I see my life as a fully grown rose ready to be picked. And I want to pick it in its prime and take all those petals, which are beautiful, and pluck them and offer them at the feet of Jesus. So that everything she did, she offered out of love for Jesus. And so she even saw in her life that by picking up a piece of straw on the ground out of pure love for Christ had eternal merit, because it's really the grace of Christ always who's she's offering out for him. So the saints are those who are friends of God, who became their authentic self through their self-denial and through the transformation of themselves. This is St. Therese. Another one of my favorite saints is also the namesake Mother Teresa. And Mother Teresa is a beautiful woman who had the call within a call. And here's an image of, this is my communion veil. This is Jesus right here. And here she's praying the rosary. And I don't know if you know much about her life, but she had this calling to serve the poorest of the poor. And she walked by this one man in the streets, and he had like maggots on him, and he was dying. And she saw Christ in him, picked him up, and wanted to take care of him. And it wasn't known during her lifetime except by her spiritual director, but she went through a huge dark night of the soul, feeling that she didn't even see, she even questioned whether or not God exists, but with faith. And it was called a purification of her own selfish love to do everything she was doing out of the glory of God. And so through her transformation of becoming more and more the real her, the real St. Teresa of Calcutta, she became the saint. And the church then declares through miracles and through signs that these people are actually in the face of God, in the presence of God. They have in their life gone through their purgation or purification, and they're able to enter into heaven because they become the true transparent windows into heaven through the way they've lived their lives. And so really all of us has a piece called The New Creation. Each of us is called to really live, and I know Amy actually has a copy of this in the print that I made. Basically, all of our life is this transformation. Basically, you have on the outside here, you have the creation of all the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth, and then you have Adam and Eve trapped down there. And that's what happens when we sin. We get trapped within ourselves. Okay? We're in the fruit of Adam and Eve, and they've lost communion with themselves, with all of creation, with each other, and with God. And God doesn't leave us there. He actually goes down, meets us where we are, lifts our chin to show us the ladder of the cross. And who was the first to say yes to that? Mary. The word Mary, Marina, comes from the aspect of water. So she was the first yes. She was the first one to enter into the womb of Mother Church. And we had to be reborn, water and spirit. From the side of Christ flowed forth water and blood, which was basically the birth of the church. And so you have here, he calls us each to enter into the womb of Mother Church. Become Saint Me is to be the real you, to live a resurrected life here and now. And so really this is just a summary of what we're all called to do, is to become the real you, which is really Saint You. And so I know we're pretty much out of time, and I don't know if...
Any questions for Allison? You got about a minute.
About a minute, got questions about the sanctity, but really, I think the beautiful thing is in our church, we're all called to be saints. And we're part of that process of in via, on the way, we're on pilgrimage. And when we choose God out of love, we're becoming the more and more the real us, the real saints that we're called to be. So any questions? Sanctity is made pure and clear.
Another way of looking at this, or to add to it, is so who are these saints, right? We already spent, but in a way, the becoming the real you, as Allison said, is like taking away what is not what God has in mind of you. Well, these saints are a couple of things. One, they are heavenly helpers along the way. That's why we have devotion to the saints. But there's something more about devotion to the saints than just as asking them for intercession, right? To really have a devotion to a saint is to imitate that person. Right? It's imitating the virtues of the saints. And that's why we have patron saints. When you choose a patron saint, you're choosing someone who said that is a model to you. I know a young lady who, for her confirmation saint, she had really bad back pain. Right? She chose a saint. She said, "Well, is there a patron saint of back pain?" And she found this Saint Gemma. Right? And then she looked at the life of the Saint Gemma, and the fact was she really was a holy woman who had to wear a brace and struggled and had a really hard time, but it became an encouragement, right? A model for this young woman who needed that encouragement and support, right? To imitate the person's life, right, and the virtues of that person is a way of becoming transformed into the person that God is calling you to be, right? Looking at like older brothers and sisters who have gone before us that we look to as a model, as one might look to a historical figure or an athlete as a model, right? We have these spiritual athletes. And we say this is the way they went before, this is what they struggled through, and this is what they overcame. Right? This is a way of doing what St. Paul said, right? Be imitators of me, St. Paul said, as I am an imitator of Christ. And that's what it means to have devotion to the saints.
And we even have the idea of the Catholic family, this universal family, is that we have these saints in heaven that we can look to as older brothers and sisters. And in the Protestant understanding, I know there's a lot of people, you ask for prayers and intentions here and now, but we have all these other people who are already in the place of God and seeing Him face to face that we can also call upon as our older brothers and sisters. And because they're older brothers and sisters, we also celebrate. Just like we celebrate birthdays, we celebrate their feast days. And it's part of that big aspect of the fact that Catholics love to celebrate. We love to party. We love to have a great time because we are body and soul. We are physical and spiritual and mystical and invisible aspect of being part of the invisible body of Christ and the visible body of Christ, the Church. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's conclude with prayer. Would you like to?